I hushed Michael as my home number flashed on my mobile screen, barely dressed. Flopping onto the hotel bed, Michael shot me a resentful look. "Dave, honey, I was just about to dial you," I lied. "I crawled into bed and just wanted to hear your voice before drifting off. It's surprisingly easy to pretend." My affair with my boss, Michael, had been going on for 3 months. This was only our 4th secret meeting, the first one outside a dingy motel room. During a work conference in another state, we went out for a fancy dinner before heading back to our hotel. I was wearing black suspenders and stockings, while he sported ridiculous ladybug print boxers. The message I sent to Dave felt empty. "Heading to bed early, give the kids goodnight kisses, hoping for some peace tonight." It hurt to talk to Dave while being with Michael. Honestly, my husband deserved better. Today, I promised myself to end things, but guilt weighed on me, dampening any enjoyment. I didn't actively seek out an affair, but the intense satisfaction of that first encounter with Michael kept drawing me back. The thought of losing my marriage terrified me, yet I couldn't resist the temptation, even though I promised myself I wouldn't repeat it. And here I was, giving in once again. Lost in a haze of wine, Michael's charm, and memories of Dave's love, I struggled to focus on Dave's questions. Desperate to cover up, I quickly diverted. "Dave, let's forget about the boring conference stuff. Instead, let's talk about what I have planned for you when I get back on Friday." Dave's response hit me like a ton of bricks, making me drop the phone and recoil in pain as agony shot through me. I screamed, accidentally scratching Michael's face with my suspender belt's hook. Holding my throbbing crotch, I reached for the phone, but it was too late. The call had ended. In a panic, I tried redialing, but couldn't reconnect. Michael, confused, asked, "What did that jerk say?" After composing himself, he questioned, "Are you still craving him, baby? Did Michael leave you unsatisfied?" I wanted to scream. Dave knew. He knew about us. "I need to go home," I declared, ignoring the pain. I hurriedly dressed, grabbed my suitcase, and headed for the door. "Cindy, do you think your husband knows who my wife is?" Michael asked eagerly, not sparing a glance for the self-centered guy. Ignoring his desperate question, I dashed to the lobby, where the night porter handed me a pen. From there, I sat at Brisbane Airport from 11 p.m. to 5 a.m., calling home repeatedly, but only getting busy signals. Dave's cell phone was no better, straight to voicemail. Departing from Melbourne Airport at 7:30 a.m., I took a $150 taxi to our country house. Anticipating it to be empty with the kids at school and Dave at work, I was met with more than emptiness when I opened the door. It looked deserted, giving off an eerie vibe, but a quick glance confirmed my fear. Much of Dave's and the girls' belongings were missing. Despair washed over me as I faced the consequences of my foolish actions. Brewing a strong coffee in an attempt to lift my spirits, I confronted the reality of my situation. Exhausted from lack of sleep for over a day, the restless night before, and the burden of heavy thoughts during the flight, I felt weighed down. Where could Dave have gone? It took an hour to remember that our phones had a tracking feature to find a partner's phone, and another hour to figure out how to use it. But it revealed Dave's cell phone heading north on the Hume Highway. I should have known right away. In times of stress, Dave always sought comfort with his sister, his only living relative, who lived in Albury, reachable via the Hume. Hurrying out of the house with only the luggage I had in Brisbane, what should have been a 4-hour drive to Albury turned into a nightmare. The monotonous roads threatened to lull me to sleep, but I knew reaching Dave as soon as possible improved our chances of saving our marriage. Why hadn't I thought about it sooner? I didn't rest, constantly calling Dave's cell phone. Thoughts of divorce swirled in my mind, knowing that the law favored women in custody battles. Dave was devoted to our kids. He wouldn't want this. But if necessary, I could use it to my advantage. Struggling to stay awake, I finally arrived at my sister-in-law's cottage. The house was silent and empty. They probably expected me to chase after them and ran off. I decided to stay in the car and wait for their return. I must have fallen asleep for a couple of hours because it was already late evening when I woke up. A brief nap didn't help at all. I cursed myself for not using the phone tracking feature again. Dave's phone was now nearing the outer suburbs of Sydney. Without much hesitation, I set off in pursuit, but exhaustion nearly got the best of me, forcing me to stop at a motel in the town of Yas. Before collapsing onto the bed, I checked Dave's location. The phone was pinpointed in the Taralga area of Sydney. What was he doing in Taralga? There were no friends or family there, no one I could recall. I woke up just after 4 in the morning, thinking I might catch Dave when he was too tired to ignore my call. I immediately dialed his mobile number, but it went straight to voicemail. "Dave, what's going on?" I clenched my teeth in frustration and headed north once more. By 8 o'clock, I found myself on the outskirts of Sydney and decided to be strategic. I pulled over to check my husband's location. Phew, he was still in Taralga. I plugged Taralga into my sat-nav and hit the road. Ever experienced Sydney traffic on the Thursday before a long weekend? It's a nightmare. When I finally reached Taralga, my car was running on fumes. Honestly, I was barely holding on myself. A quick snack at a roadside diner just wasn't enough to handle the stress. Stopping on the side of the road, I took another look at where Dave was. According to the tracker, he was 50 kilometers east of Sydney. How was that possible? There's nothing but the Tasman Sea there. On closer inspection, I noticed his altitude was 6,000 meters and his speed was over 500 kilometers per hour. That jerk was on a plane. I watched as the trail veered north and vanished. Dave and my kids were on a plane going nowhere. Dave, my dear husband, I made the decision to move forward, but I felt lost, unsure of what steps to take next. When I spotted the hotel signs at the airport, I slowed down. Booking a room, even just for one night, took a toll on my credit card funds. Yet, in the relative calm of my room, I scolded myself for not checking at home if the children's passports were in the safe. I stared at my phone, feeling a surge of excitement when sometime later, the locator suddenly indicated that Dave was 10,000 meters above Port Moresby in Papua New Guinea. Surely, Dave wouldn't take the kids to such a risky place. However, it made me wonder, how long has Dave been planning this? Does he know the divorce laws as well as I do? Could he try to run away with the kids to a place where I can't find them? Surely not. He's not that foolish. He knows I'll track him down no matter where he hides, even if it's at the ends of the earth. I must have dozed off for a while because when I woke up, I found that Dave was in Bangkok. However, I wasn't going to make the same mistake again and decided to keep an eye on him to make sure he wasn't transiting somewhere else. It was a long night, at the end of which Dave was still in Thailand. Now my problem was how to get from Sydney to Thailand when my son was lying at home in Melbourne. Trying to book a plane ticket home revealed that my credit card was exhausted. I jumped on the internet, and after a few clicks, I discovered that all but $2,000 had disappeared from all accounts that I could access. It definitely seemed like my smart husband had made his move and left me without any resources to find him. But why would he want to leave me with nothing? Was it his sense of fair play? The remaining drop of love for me? I stopped understanding him. I transferred the money to a credit card and bought the cheapest flight ticket from Sydney to Melbourne. I abandoned the car in the airport parking lot. My children were more important to me. The budget airline canceled the first 2 flights that could have taken me. Why didn't I think to take my passport with me right away? I was hoping that Dave and the girls would stay in Thailand for a fun weekend. Otherwise, I would be so damn unhappy. The money was running out catastrophically. I returned home after another exorbitantly expensive taxi ride. I made sure that Dave hadn't moved anywhere yet and called the travel agency I usually used. The next morning, I secured a last-minute spot in a freight class transporting cattle to Thailand. The agent confirmed that I didn't need a visa. A trip to the safe for a passport confirmed that my children's passports were there. I just gritted my teeth. "Right, watch out, Dave. I'm coming." Since the flight was at 8 a.m. and I didn't have a car, I ordered a taxi for 4 a.m. and went to pack my things. When the sky was still pitch black, I woke up quite alarmed. Well, at least I got some sleep. Stress grew unstressed when I went to get my little travel suitcase and the handle broke off. The taxi driver fumed while I quickly stuffed all my gear into the only other suitcase of the same size that I had. At the morning flights, it seemed as if it was for evil or popular. I barely made my way through a long queue at check-in and customs to get to the waiting room. Just in time, after getting into the cattle truck, I checked. Dave was still in Bangkok until the flight attendant growled at me to turn off the phone. As soon as we took off, I used the plane's internet to enable international roaming on my phone. The hours dragged on. I got off the Aero Bridge and walked along the row of windows outside, trying not to think about how dangerously small my funds were, but calmly confident that I can, if not persuade, then intimidate. And patiently, I turned on the phone's fine tracking function, and it immediately beeped. Dave was only 346 meters away from me, directly to the east. Running to the nearest window, I found myself looking in exactly the right direction. My blood froze in my veins when I looked at the indicated course. There was only one building in the right place, and at about the right distance. There was a huge logo of an international courier company on it when my brain made connections. Now Dave's plan was obvious. He sent his switched-on phone with a power bank through a courier service to where his wayward but stupid wife would follow. Suddenly, Dave's goal of leaving me a small amount of money made sense. He wanted me to be able to go that far, but two things struck me. Firstly, that Dave knew me well enough to know that I would immediately give chase. And secondly, Dave really wasn't in the mood to forgive, but it's some kind of stupid revenge to throw me on the other side of the world. What's the point? He doesn't think I'll get lost and end up on a desert island having no other way out. I continued my way to the customs office. Now, I'm going to buy a return flight ticket to get out of here and sit at the airport until it's time to go home. What other choice did I have? No. I didn't have the money to stay anywhere, and I might have to walk home from Melbourne Airport, that dawned on me. I called Michael. He answered after a few weary seconds. I was ashamed to ask him, but there was no way. "Mike, could you transfer some money to my card for me?" "No," he said shortly and hung up. Everyone betrayed me. That's it. I stood at the end of the queue at Thai Customs. I've been exhausted from the chase for the last 2 days. The lower back was tied in a knot. The stomach did not know whether it wanted to be empty or to be full, and then I noticed 2 heavily armed policemen walking slowly along the queue. They were constantly looking at some photo, and then carefully at each woman. Their faces lit up with joy when they saw me. Dave Brown tiptoed out of the bedroom, where his 2 charming daughters had finally fallen asleep, sat down in a comfortable old armchair, and poured himself some whiskey. He wasn't used to being alone, and couldn't decide whether to watch an old movie or read a book. It was a relaxing couple of days at a local resort with his work partner Bill, with Bill's wife Nancy, and with their son. This boy was about the same age as he did. The only concern these days was to keep an eye on the 2 girls enjoying the pools, water park, ice cream, and other amenities. Arriving home at 2 in the morning when Bill was carrying the sleeping girls to their bedrooms took its toll, and he doubted that he would last long reading or watching a movie. His thoughts were interrupted by the ringing of his home phone. "Ma? Dave Brown here," Dave muttered. "Hello, my name is Jack Bloodstone. I'm from the Australian consulate in Bangkok. I'm calling about your wife, Cindy Brown." Jack introduced himself. Dave interrupted him before Jack could explain the reason for his call, saying, "You see, Cindy Brown is still officially my wife, but we broke up, Mr. Bloodstone. If she has any problems, I don't feel obligated to help her with anything." "Are you aware, Mr. Brown, of your ex-wife's money problems?" Jack asked. "Yes, it would be correct to say that she had money problems after leaving for another man," Dave acknowledged. "Wait, are you calling from Bangkok?" Dave questioned. Well, it's a sad story. Do you think she is so desperate for money to act as a courier? That is, to transport half a kilo of substances? I don't know, my ex-wife? She is somewhat unpredictable. Everything can be. Perhaps she knows people who could give her half a kilo of marijuana. I recently found out that she was hanging out with all sorts of dubious types with a dark past. So you said Thailand? Dave pondered aloud. Yes, Mr. Brown, of course. If she is found guilty, she will face 15 years in a Thai prison, which I can assure you is not at all like an Australian one, 15 years. Jack explained. Oh my God, that's very bad, isn't it? My God, she's completely… The Australian government will provide her with a lawyer if she cannot pay for it herself. Yes, I suppose she will have to rely on a legal advisor provided by the government, or if you want, I can give you some phone numbers of her family, so I'll clarify. Aren't you going to help your wife? Dave responded, concerned. No, I'm not going to. It's a pity, of course, for a woman. But, as I said, we broke up. I have a request. Please keep me informed. It will be necessary to say something to our daughter as you wish, Mr. Brown. I'll write you an email. Could you please provide the phone numbers of her family as you suggested earlier? Jack requested. Dave dictated the phone numbers of Cindy's parents and her sister, adding, I'll be waiting for your call. My cell phone number. I'll be in touch, Mr. Brown. Good. Goodbye, Jack concluded. Dave hung up the phone and leaned back in his chair. Something pricked his leg. He reached out and took 3 screws out of his pocket. Such nickel-plated screws were usually used to attach handles to a suitcase. He put them on the table next to the chair and smiled. Oh, the agony of choice, Dave thought. Send photos to Michael's wife now, or postpone it until tomorrow. Tomorrow will be a day. There will be a fresh head and everything will be posted. As soon as Cindy is convicted, he will think about sending her some reading material. For example, her diaries, which he found. He first looked at them when Cindy was unpacking the things they had taken from her mother's house after the funeral. Cindy acted like she didn't want Dave to know they existed. She grabbed her notebooks and ran into the bedroom. When she returned, she irritably reprimanded him about how it was not good to read other people's notes. This behavior caused alarm. If she had been calm, he wouldn't have thought of them. He had to admit that she hid them well. It took him 2 weeks of searching to get, reading her barely disguised hints about the first 3 novels. Dave knew that she would get lost again, and he would be able to get absolute proof, not only for himself, but also for his daughters. He knew that in the coming years he would need both, so that his daughters would understand and forgive him for what he was going to do. It's funny how trust can make you blind, because as soon as he started looking for signs of her infidelity, he found them almost immediately. The rest, as they say, is a matter of technique, taking a glass. He set the alcohol and a couple of tears rolled down his cheeks. Dave, in spite of everything, he had difficulty coming up with a plan for his revenge. The difficulty was not in the organizational details, it was just that simple. He knew Sydney as well as he knew himself, and could predict her actions in a given situation with 100% probability. The difficulty lay in his shower condition. He couldn't physically do that to her, and he constantly had to remind himself, what awaits him in the case of an ordinary divorce? Loss of home, money, comfort, and most importantly, the loss of his girls. And what good can children get if their mother starts openly jumping from bed to bed, at the same time risking both their health and the well-being of their dog? What lesson will she teach them by her behavior? How will her changing fans treat the girls? These thoughts decided the fate of his wife. Dave raised his glass and held it up to the photograph of him and Cindy on their wedding day, which was displayed in a place of honor above the fireplace. 9, I'm sorry, dear, but you deserve it.
All right, that was a fun story. Now let's move on to another exciting one. Stay tuned and let's dive in.
For some background here, I had a wife when I was 24 years old and she was 19. We got serious, got married, had 2 kids in a relatively short period of time. Smack! Why the rush? Take your time, gentlemen. I went to college, thank God, got a job with the potential for a good career. I made enough money for us to live reasonably well. Not rich, though, on my salary alone. She did not go to college. She never had any issues holding a job, but she never had a high-paying one either. After our first son was born, she stopped working to stay at home to be a full-time mother. Then we had our daughter, and that meant that she was completely finished with work. We spent the next 15 years living a very normal life and were a relatively normal family. Okay, so you took care of everything. She was a stay-at-home mom, raised the kids, all that. I'm guessing you are definitely, at least when all this goes down here, you were no doubts. I'm not sure if you're going to get a new one. When we were sitting on the deck, watching the dog run around the backyard like a lunatic, the kids were both in school. She stood up, pulled her phone out, and started making a video of the dog. I stood right behind her, put my arms around her stomach, and lowered my chin to rest on her shoulder. So one of these tender moments, taking it all, the dog, the backyard, the life, and watch what happens. I went back and forth between watching the dog directly and looking at him through her phone. It was after about 10 seconds that she received a drop-down message notification. It wasn't from a number, so it was clearly someone in her contacts. But since my eyes focused on the text, I didn't see the sender. She pushed it up with her thumb extremely fast, while it was too fast for me to read it. I definitely caught a few words, particularly wild, and next time, well, most people, I'm sure you know, would stop and see what the message is all about. If it was some random thing. So she's like, "Whoops, what timing, huh?" I asked who it was, and she said, "I don't know, bullcrap, boom." That was one that my instincts immediately went into high alert. And all our years together, she had never done or said anything that filled my stomach and made with such instant apprehension and dread. I momentarily became physically weak. I might exploit with many simultaneous thoughts, such as, how do you not know? I brushed off text from people in the exact same manner plenty of times. I couldn't possibly not know who it was sent by, even if I tried. You can't help but instantly recognize the sender in just a tiny fraction of a second. Number 2, there's no way that this inconsequential dog video takes priority over an incoming text of an unknown nature. She already had many short videos of that dog on her phone. While they were all nice, no individual video is so special or precious that it would really matter much if it was deleted. Number 3, I instantly recalled an incident from a couple of years prior. I didn't think much of it at the time. To keep it short, I'll just say that she acted a little out of character when I wanted to use her phone. My battery had just died, a couple of years or a couple of weeks before. Okay, between those thoughts and the words that I caught, I realized that I had to act right now. I put my hand on her phone and squeezed it with enough strength, making it clear that I was taking it from her. As soon as she protested, I took it by force. She attempted to resist at first, but immediately realized the futility of that. "You can't take my phone!" I took her phone inside, putting in all her passwords, and that's when the second gut punch hit me. As you probably guessed, the password had been changed. Of course it had, and meanwhile she's probably banging on the freaking door. "Let me in! Let me in!" To put that into context, neither of us had ever used anything but the same passwords before. In all the years we'd been together, whether it was our smartphones, laptops, or desktops, there was nothing insignificant. Then I asked her what her password was. The third gut punch. Rather than give it to me, she asked why. I'm sure that to many of you, changing your password and asking why may seem perfectly normal, but not to us. Given the nature of our relationship over the last 20 years, this is practically a definitive confession that something horrible had happened, and all the evidence was right there in her phone. All the secrets of the world can be found in someone's phone or browser history. I answered her with the, "Swack and inspect every single thing that you have on here." She had stuttered and stammered like she knew she needed to say something, but had no idea what. I cut her off until I point-blanked that I was keeping her phone and she wouldn't get it back until after I went through it. So, this guy, he's not messing around and good for him. And clearly she's shocked by this. This is not what she expected if she ever did caught. Clearly she didn't plan on this. She then said, "Why are you doing this?" I answered with, "What's the password?" And she answered with something that neither of us had ever heard, or so I thought ever would hear. "None of your business." I'm making it my business, sugar muffin. At this point, I realized that the conversation was absolutely pointless. I grabbed my jacket and started heading out. She asked me where was I going, and I couldn't help but throw her words right back at her, and I said, "None of your business." I knew I had to get her phone unlocked. While I certainly am a competent guy, I am not a tech guy, and I didn't know where to begin. Can I do it myself? Do I go to Verizon? Do I go to Apple? Do I go to a third party? Will there be legal concerns? Then I immediately thought of an absolute diabolical idea. My wife is clearly terrified that I thought of me leaving by myself with her phone. So I'd rather come along with me. She asked, "Where are we going?" and I just said, "Just for a drive." She agreed, and I told her I didn't want to talk about anything, so the drive was quiet. Meanwhile, I'm kind of surprised she's not trying to tackle you in the front yard in front of the neighbors for her phone. As far as I was concerned, the silent drive just added to my belief that she had done something unspeakable. If you think about it, My behavior over the last 20 minutes was absolutely out of control. If she was innocent, she would have been horrified and furious at what I was doing to her. But no, instead of telling me what a monster I was, expressing her shock and disbelief that I was even capable of behaving in this way, it seemed like her only genuine concern was what ultimately happened with her phone. Well, I've done plenty of stories when the wives, girlfriends, whatever were guilty as hell, but they still put on the act that, you're such a monster, you're such an a-hole, how dare you not trust me, you all get the point. So just because she wasn't doing that doesn't mean that, I drove to a public park, located about 3 miles from the house. Since it was a weekday and the weather was chilly, the park was practically empty. I opened the door and got out without saying anything. She started to say something, but I completely ignored her. Then she got out of the car and started coming around to my side. After she took a few steps, I quickly opened my door, got back in the car, and locked the doors. "Well, you mentioned it's cold outside," I remarked. She became absolutely distraught and asked what I was doing. I told her that she was either going to give me the password or I was going to leave her here with no phone and no ride. So this is funny, but you all can imagine how this could go very bad for him if you think about it. In hindsight, I really was ashamed that I wasn't in the right state of mind to properly enjoy and appreciate her absolutely epic and glorious meltdown. Considering that I was only 30 minutes in to what was ultimately the absolute destruction of my life, as I knew it, I wasn't able to enjoy any satisfaction whatsoever. At least I was fortunate enough to witness it. At that point, I started to feel a little bit guilty and began to second-guess it myself. But those thoughts were immediately dismissed by the realization that she should have ended all this, and she could have ended this at any moment, but simply by giving me the password. Because You're having a battle of wills here, man. And she's not gonna budge. I told her through the barely cracked window that was gonna getting her phone to go through everything and that nothing could be done to stop me. That I told that the only thing she has any control over is whether she gets a ride back to the house or gets stranded. And of course, the only way to get right home was to give me the password. Dude, you're not effing around, are you? You have to play hardball. That's what is respected. It is what it is. I then started the car and told that I'll be driving away in 10 seconds and I wouldn't be looking back. After 10 seconds, I put the car in drive, took my foot off the brake, and the car slowly started moving forward. She's still standing her ground. She's not budging. I was quite concerned that she would throw herself in front of the car to stop me. Laughs. That's actually pretty funny. You're driving away and she's on the windshield, Thankfully, she's not. After the car slowly rolled a few feet, she finally gave me the password. "It's about ducking time, you stubborn jackass!" she exclaimed. I stopped the car, put it in park, and I locked the phone. I told her that I wouldn't let her in until after I went through everything. Then I shut the window. If you try talking loud, so I just blasted the radio, she shut up, walked away, and sat on the park bench. I finally started digging through her phone. It turns out that she has been having you-know-what with a coworker. Upon confirming this, I became ill and had to stop looking at the phone. I took a moment to regain focus and then continued. It didn't take long for me to find a picture of them. He looked like he was only a few years older than our son. So that was a young guy at work. He is giving her some cougar action. Their wife is probably in her early 40s at this point, and he's only a few years older than your son, so he's like half her age, half your age, and probably her big giant ego boost to make her feel like she's not getting old and she's still attractive. Tension and validation, you get to the point. And you've got all the info right here. I wasn't interested in details like how long it had been going on and what kind of feelings she had for him. Instead, I needed to find the most damaging things that I could so that I could absolutely destroy and humiliate her to every single person that she knew. And guys, he's not joking. He's not exaggerating here. "I told you," scored Sturth. "I want you the private folder of photos that requires you to re-enter the password." I mainly found more pictures along with a short video that made me absolutely sick. These morons record everything. It never ceases to amaze me how they document their actions and conversations on their phones. You know damn well she's showing this to all her ducking girlfriends. They're all comparing notes. At this point, I realized I couldn't give her back the phone, and there was absolutely no way I was letting her back in the car. So I did exactly what I promised I wouldn't do. If she gave me her password, I drove off and left her stranded without her phone. I didn't even look back in the mirror. Again, this could have blown up in my face. Fortunately, it did not. Upon arriving home, I changed the password on her phone so that only I could access it. I knew I would be keeping her phone indefinitely. I sent the video, the pictures, and the screenshots of some of the texts to my phone, then to my email so I had multiple copies in case anything were to somehow disappear. My son came out while I was doing this, and I figured there was no point in waiting. I said, "Sit down, I gotta tell you something major." So, you're immediately controlling the narrative. You're not letting her get to the kids first or anybody else. That's the smart way to go. I told him point blank that I just discovered that his mom has been having, what with a young 20-something from her work. And then it's something that most people might think was outrageously inappropriate, and I don't disagree. Gee, can you guys all guess what he's about to do here? I figured it out the first time reading it, but I don't care either. I hella profound and should have a picture of the two of them together completely unclothed. Something no kid ever wants to see is mom butt unclothed, probably with her mouth in certain places that we don't want to think about our mothers doing. My son was in absolute shock. Yeah, no crap, Dad. It had no words. I told that none of this would have an effect in our relationship. I don't know about that, dude. Just showing again a picture of his mom getting ducked in many which ways to the sun, he may think a little differently of you for showing him that. Yeah, you gotta go out of his head. He's gonna have to be ducking hypnotized or something. He could get that crap out of his head. Every time I look, and every time his mom wants to get my casket and be like, "Oh, craw, she used to ducking Aquafresh." Then I told him that I was sorry to have to say this, but the truth is that his mother is nothing but a dirty witch. I'm going to divorce her immediately. I told him that he'll be free to live with whichever one of us he wants to. Gee, tough decision. I told him that I was sorry to be dropping all of this on him out of nowhere, but I just discovered all of this myself only a couple of hours ago. I told him that the picture I showed him was one of many, and that his mother's phone had more than enough indisputable evidence, including a video, to prove that everything I told him was 100% true. That's all, and he was free to look through the phone himself. "I think one picture is enough, Dad, for him to get the point," he said. But I understood if he didn't want to, you think? He did not. He said the picture was all he needed to see. I asked him how I should tell his sister. Probably not showing her the pictures again. He said that he would take care of that, and I agreed. My wife eventually made it home. To this day, I don't know how or care how. I told her that I'm going to think about speaking to her and to take everything she needed from my bedroom and move into the spare bedroom. Well, good for you. And in all these stories, usually it's the husband that moves into the spare bedroom or the cottage or the goddamn couch in the basement that's, 75 years old. No, she can leave. Good. And to take everything she needs from my bedroom. But my son just looked at her in disbelief, and of course, the waterworks began. Of course, one out of LL Falls in the Agri Falls. He told us to stay away from him, and she went directly upstairs. A while later, our daughter arrived home. My son immediately took charge and told her to come outside with him for a moment. Yeah, because your son didn't want him to show you more of your life's adventures on her phone. He grabbed his mother's phone, so I gave him the password. I couldn't hear anything my son said, but oh my God, I could hear my daughter. Okay, maybe he did show her. The wife obviously could too, because the cries from upstairs were loud and clear in the kitchen. Oh, I can only imagine the noise coming from the spare bedroom where she was like, "Shut the duck up, I'm watching the playoffs." The next few days were surprisingly uneventful. The wife stayed away from me, the kids ignored her, and she actually didn't spend all her time begging for forgiveness. At least not after her initial attempts were rejected. She just stayed in the guest room, only leaving to eat and use the bathroom. We had a landline in the house, and she was able to call her work and tell them that she needed time off. She used the landline just enough that her cell phone wasn't getting blown up by people trying to reach her. I think one reason she kept her cell and didn't bother me was that my behavior when I took her phone from her generally terrified her. In a way, she was coming to terms with the realization that I wasn't the person she thought I was, just like I was about her. In other words, she probably never in a million years thought that you would handle things the way you did in terms of when the thing popped up on the phone and you were suspicious she didn't expect that and also you going score of stir. By the way, we're not done with him scorching earth, guys. We're just getting started. The kids were handling surprisingly well other than completely ignoring her mom. My son, actor, relatively normal. My daughter was more upset. She referred to her mother as the witch. Upon hearing that, I slightly chuckled in a low-key way that made it clear she had my blessing to use that term. You know, it's likely that your son is more likely to forgive the mom, or at least move on, have a relationship with her than the daughter, because while I've done playing stories with the daughters, stick with the mothers, there's other stories where the daughters should truly have a great relationship with their fathers. When they find out what the mother's done to the father and the family, there ain't no forgiving the mother from the daughter. Oh, I know a lot of you guys have heard those stories. I'm very thankful that nothing will ever happen when the kids were younger. I put a key lock on my bedroom door so she had absolutely no access. I also taken off work. At first, I just stayed mostly in my room thinking about things and digging more into her phone. The digging didn't turn up anything new. After a couple of days, I was feeling sorry for myself. I was ready to finally start destroying her. We had a small friend group that consists of couples. I called my closest friend from the group and told him everything. I sent him 2 of the most humiliating pictures she had, along with screenshots of a few texts, until that nothing would make me happier than him sharing them with everyone. Remember, gentlemen, these pictures on her phone didn't appear by magic. She willingly archived her events with this young lad, and stored him on her phone. I know that from a legal standpoint that was not a good idea. But in that particular moment, I didn't give a crap at all. I was expecting your phone to start blowing up at some point, but no, it's like everyone just cut her off without even trying to reach out to her. To this day, I'm still friends with some of them. None of them talk to her. It's kind of interesting. Well, the ones that you don't talk to, I wonder if the wives knew what was going on or were up to no good themselves. Who knows? Next, I had to tell her parents. Oh, Jesus. I decided to tell her mother, and that her mother could handle telling her father as I had done with my friend. I sent her mother the 2 pictures and the same text. I told her that plenty more, including a graphic video, that I would happily send upon a request. She declined. I think her mother-in-law got the point with the 2 pictures. I always had a positive relationship with the in-laws, so it was unfortunate I had to say what I had to say next. I learned that while I was allowing her to be the one to tell her husband out of respect, I would take matters into my own hands if she did not. I would not allow for him to be unaware of what was actually happening. I asked her not to give him the watered-down version of events. I also let her know that I would not tolerate him being told anything that would remotely suggest that he bore any blame. Yeah, if you weren't careful, believe me, your wife would have twisted the story a bit. You're the reason she cheated. He works too much. Sure, whatever. I also let her know that her grandkids already knew, and they saw their mother's phone. So it was inevitable that giving her husband an accurate version of events would ultimately backfire at some point, or inaccurate version of the events would backfire at some point in the future. She was actually appalled that I let the kids see the phone. Yeah, personally, I wouldn't have shown the son and the kids see the phone. Laughs. Yeah, personally, I wouldn't have shown the son and the kids the pictures. I would have made it clear. And I didn't believe you. If they didn't believe you, that's not true, Dad. I got proof. No, not my mother. Okay, son, here she is. There's your mom's mouth. Then only then would I do that. But I wouldn't willingly even, as pissed off as I would be. That's the only thing. I know we look at all as we rely on agreements and disagreements about that particular subject there. They deserve to know, but if they wanted to see the pictures, fine. I told her that understand I agree that it probably was but I also told that I have no regrets about doing it. I told that my top priority was to make sure that the kids knew the truth and were not giving any false versions of what happened. At the end of the call on good terms, sadly, I haven't communicated with either them ever since. It is unfortunate because you said you had a good relationship with them, but at the end of the day, they'd be really pissed off and disappointed their daughter, but they're gonna choose her, of course, well, most of the time after that. I mean, a put with a divorce lawyer, all right. To be honest, this is kind of where the story ends. I said that because nothing really crazy dramatic happened from that point on. The wife moved to their parents and still lives with them to this day. She didn't contest the divorce. She could have gotten alimony, but the kids told her that they would hate her guts forever if she came after my money after destroying our family. Her parents have quite a bit of money and she's their only child, so she's quite spoiled. She's financially well off. Sometimes I wish her parents had been stricter with her, but then again, maybe I'd be paying even more if they had. Both kids stayed with me until they moved out. I sold the house and gave her, the cheating witch, her portion. I couldn't resist. She got her share of the profit as per our divorce agreement. It was a substantial amount, and you can bet I kept the dog, R.I.P. Buster. Eventually, the kids let their mother back into their lives, but it was never quite the same. My son put it best when he told me that he had forgiven her, but he would never forget. I've stayed single, having had a couple flanks since then, but nothing more than that. The kids are doing just fine.